What kind of protections do you have as a consumer, and what kind of protection do you actually need? Questions we ask as the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau enters stage left as the world turns in the new Trump administration. Let's talk about it. I'm Jenna, and this is Smarter News. We are certainly getting the opportunity to talk about a lot of parts of government that we don't normally discuss, and I have received a ton of questions on what we're going to focus on today. I do admittedly have a soft spot for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau because I was there when it started a million years ago, or during the financial crisis of 2007 and 2008, when I worked as a business journalist and covered the rise of this agency. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau rose out of a period of economic chaos, and it's really easy to forget what that crisis was like. So let me just take you back there for a moment. There was a real concern about the collapse of the global banking system, a real concern about the collapse of our currency, a real concern about the collapse of our financial system in general, and maybe a depression, let alone a recession, which we actually did experience. I remember one night going into work around 1:30 in the morning because I worked as an early morning business news anchor and had a 5 a.m. show Eastern time. And Midtown Manhattan in the middle of the night was as busy as it was in the middle of the day because an investment bank right near our office was on the verge of collapse, and people were just filling the streets, trying to get their stuff out of the office, coming and going. It really felt like a movie scene, but it was reality. And I remember wondering, is life over as we know it? Is this the end of something? It felt that serious. Part of the reason for this crisis included questionable lending practices. And I'm going to stay very general for the purpose of our conversation today. Questionable lending practices both to consumers and questionable investments by banks based on those loans. It was frightening. And also sort of darkly fascinating because it revealed a lot of practices in the financial industry that weren't always illegal per se, but not necessarily ethical. And in some cases, it seemed the laws simply had not caught up with the technology. And so just underscoring this, it was a very, very chaotic time. I mention this context because it matters to why the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was started. Lawmakers were trying to answer the question, how do we prevent this sort of crisis from happening again? And one way, some thought, was to start a new agency with the purpose of focusing on the consumer and making sure that these sort of lending practices don't happen again. It sounds easy enough, but the debate at the time is a familiar one, a question about whether more government is the answer. And that's a fundamental question in America that we've really been asking since our founding. The question of whether we need the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is a question we're tackling this week because it is currently on the radar of the Trump administration. And currently, its operations have been paused. Senator Elizabeth Warren doesn't like this. She once was a Harvard law professor and is widely credited with pioneering the idea of the Consumer Protection Bureau. In fact, I interviewed her about this topic many years ago, and she went on to help the Obama administration develop this agency. She's now a senator, a Democrat from Massachusetts, and she still believes the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is needed. Here she is talking about that this week.
Congress created the CFPB to protect people from getting swindled. Congress built it. And no one other than Congress, not Donald Trump, not Elon Musk, no one can fire the financial cops.
One of the things that makes this agency different than others is it is created by Congress, but not funded by Congress. It's funded by the Federal Reserve. So it's a very unique structure, and it has raised some questions about oversight because Congress, in theory, controls the purse strings, but doesn't in this case. And that critique about a lack of oversight when it comes to this bureau's financials has existed for years. It's not new to this time and place, but we're going to hear more about it. Still, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau says it has returned billions of dollars to consumers since its inception and saved us billions of dollars, $20 billion in junk fees every year. But let's fast forward. President Trump's nominee for Director of Office of Management and Budget, Russell Vought, now leads the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. He's in that role sort of temporarily. And here he is a few weeks ago speaking in a Senate hearing when his nomination was being considered.
Growing up as the son of an electrician and a school teacher, I saw firsthand the sacrifices my parents made to balance their budget and save for the future. They are a reminder of the burden government spending can place on everyday Americans. My parents and countless others like them have always been the measure by which I evaluate policies and spending decisions. Today, nearly 80% of Americans do not feel confident that their children will lead better lives than they have, nearly double the 40% of Americans who said the same 2 decades ago.
Vogt actually worked in the same role under President Trump during his first administration. He also worked with the Heritage Foundation, which is a well-known fiscally conservative think tank in Washington, D.C. He also helps author a few sections of a document called Project 2025. I'm sure you've heard about that during the election. The Heritage Foundation during election cycles puts out a blueprint for the next president, and that blueprint has sparked some controversy. Vogt did not write the part about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, but here's what Project 2025 says about it. Project 2025 says that the Bureau is a highly politicized, damaging, and utterly unaccountable federal agency. It is unconstitutional. Congress should abolish it and return the consumer protection function back to banking regulators and the Federal Trade Commission. Project 2025 also alleges that the money the agency collects doesn't have proper oversight either and is often funneled towards left-leaning causes. Again, that's the viewpoint coming from a more conservative and critical perspective. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau obviously disagrees with that. So Vogt, essentially, when he comes into this role overseeing this agency, he halts work. And he doesn't provide a lot of direction about what's going on or what's next. It sounds very familiar to some of what we've seen, for example, with USAID. So this is the situation for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau right now. And the union representing workers at this agency are now suing the federal government, saying that this is overreach by the executive branch because Congress created this agency and now the executive branch is just halting operations. But those who have criticized the Bureau says it has operated without congressional oversight in general and overstepped its authority. So here we are. What does this mean to you today? And your credit card fees or your mortgage protections? It's really hard to determine. Some will argue not having this agency, if that is eventually what happens, makes you less safe as a consumer. That as technology evolves, you have less protections if we don't have a bureau like this that's focused on consumers, especially in non-traditional banking. Others, though, will argue this makes you more safe because the agency did not have proper oversight and carries out a political agenda that some say is anti-free market. So we have very, very different viewpoints and still a common question. What prevents the next financial crisis? So a lot to weigh here. The courts will undoubtedly be involved, maybe even by the time that you hear this, and we'll keep you posted. I'm so curious what you think, though, now that you have a little history, a little context. What do you think about all of this? What's the right way forward? And what stories would you like us to focus on in these quick hits? I love hearing from you. I'll see you in the comments on YouTube, or you can always write us, hello@smarternews.com. And in fact, send a voice memo. Maybe we can use it in one of our broadcasts. I always love hearing from you. In the meantime, we'll get back to work. Thank you for your support of quick, concise, nonpartisan, Smarter News.